For it is by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift of God. Ephesians 2:8. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries.
Hey guys, welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. I am one of your co-hosts, Christian Walton, and I'm here with Jonathan today. It's just the two of us. We just had our great podcast with Dr. Jerry Ray talking about the spiritual gifts and the gifts of tongues. So if you want to go back and listen to it, I encourage you to do so. And if you want to subscribe, we would always love more subscribers. We've gotten up, especially the last podcast, of views and subscribers. So thank y'all for listening, and we thank y'all for subscribing. And now today we're going to get into something a little bit different, find out more about the life of Jonathan, basically. And so I guess introduce myself, Christian Walton. I've got a bachelor's degree in Christian studies from Bruton Parker College, basically the home of the Vidalia Onion. You don't know where that is. And so it's been great being on this podcast since about February, January, somewhere in that realm. And so I'll hand it off to Jonathan to introduce himself.
Yeah, so if this is your first time listening, I've got the same degree Christian has, and I'm youth pastor. I've been pastoring for I think I'm about to hit six years now of pastoring. I mean, I've been preaching 7 years, but 6 years of pastoring, and you know, and I want to mention this. Because I'm hoping people will start. It seems like we've got a lot more people jumping in and stuff, and so I'm sure a lot of you are going to probably watch these before you watch some of the older ones. But the whole reason this podcast exists is because I got sick and tired of seeing mostly this group on Facebook. It was called Christian Apologetics, and man, they were just so mean. There was no conversation. There was no you know, there was just anger and hatred and yelling, however you do that, you know, via text. But that's what they were doing, and I was like, man, I'm sick of this. So I started an apologetics group, and then I was like, you know what, I should start a podcast where I can talk about some of these things. I could push the limits on some of these ideas out there, and ideas of sovereignty and the Bible and theology and all this stuff, and you know, and politics. You know, just something where we can come together and have conversations and talk. And you know, and still respect one another, and that's the whole goal of this podcast. So my hope is that as it keeps growing, that the Lord will use this podcast to help others and to open up the floor for others, and just to open up some very interesting conversations. I've had a lot of interesting conversations on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to some of the ones coming up as well. So so yeah, that's a little bit who I am, what the podcast is, and I'll turn it back over to Christian.
Yeah. And so today we're going to learn a little bit, as Jonathan is a bivocational youth pastor. So we're going to look at what he does when he's not with his youth and his other job. And so that job is looking at being a part of a funeral home. You want to say something, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's just funny to me because a lot of people, when you're bivocational, you know, people at your church, they only see you when you're at church, you know, so they don't even know.
Yeah.
Sometimes that I am bivocational, and then some of them, they know I'm bivocational, but they don't realize that I work 40 to 60 hours a week before I even, you know, think about church, you know. So, but yeah, it's kind of funny.
It's definitely something that's commendable. I look at it, and I don't, being full time, I'm like, I don't know how these bivocational guys do it and get it done well. And we know Jonathan has. No, you're doing. It's been great to watch you and your youth and tag along. But going into, I guess, just when and how did you get into the funeral home business?
Yeah, so it's been about a little over a year now, year and a half maybe. Well, probably a year and 3-4 months. But so yeah, I was youth pastoring at a church, and I've mentioned it here or there. I need to just get on here and share a testimony about that church, but I think I'm finally distanced enough away from it that I can really talk about it. But anyways, so when I left that church and I came to this church, the Lord opened up doors for me to come to this other church. I didn't know if I was going to be full-time, part-time at first, and so when I realized I was part-time at the church and how much I was going to be making, I said, okay, I got to find another job. So I just looked on Indeed, and Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people that go into the funeral business, there's some kind of lifelong attachment for some reason to some of this stuff. Like somebody finds embalming fascinating, or they just always wanted to respect the dead. Um, like one of my directors, she wanted to become a funeral director because she got sick of seeing bodies that just looked like they were just they had so much makeup on them that they would look they looked fake. It didn't look like the loved one that everyone's expecting to see. Um, and so anyway, when I come, I'm just sounded on Indeed, and I said I need another job, and so I met with the guy, my boss is a super strong Christian man, and he was like, "Listen, if you want to do this, I'll work with you. I'll give you Sundays off so you can be at church, and all kinds of stuff. He's done all kinds of stuff to work with me." I said, "This is great," and then I thought, okay, this would be a good job too because he would be like doing ministry, outside of church. So I still feel like a full-time minister, even though I basically have two ministries. Um, and so I applied to the job and I got the job, and then and then he told me some of the other stuff we had to do too. So I didn't know if I could handle, picking up bodies and helping dress and wash bodies and all that kind of thing that we do with the bodies at work. But um, that's kind of how I started, and now I've been there ever since. It's been about a year and a couple months. So, but yeah, so I just started and I found the job on Indeed. I needed a second job, and I ended up there.
It's cool how the Lord works in that scenario and gives you a boss that'll work with you and respects your ministry. But what does your job at the funeral home entail? I know you touched a little bit on it, but
Yeah. So the job title is funeral home associate, which means you pretty much do anything and everything. Uh, and I also have an embalmer's apprentice license. And recently, when I tore my ACL, I was helping out in the office with secretarial work a little bit before, but not as much because I wasn't in there as much. But when I tore my ACL, I learned a lot of that stuff. So I know how to enter death certificates and get them printed, and how to do some of the paperwork and all those kinds of things. But my main job now that I'm back on my feet, literally, uh, is so a funeral home associate. We do the pickups and removals, so we're on call at nighttime, and then when we're at work during the day, we can get calls. So I rotate on call schedules every night. As soon as the day's over at 5 o'clock, we go on call. Whoever's on call for the night, and we get calls anywhere between five. Well, really any time of the day. So. But we're on call from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. And so if somebody dies at 1 o'clock and we get called at 2 o'clock, we got to go out and pick up the body in the middle of the night. And so we bring them back, we put them in the coolers, we tag bodies, we wash bodies. Um, and like I said, I have a bomber's apprentice license, so I'm able to help embalm a little bit for a couple of years. And then I work at funerals. I talk with pastors, so there's a lot of PR. There's a lot of getting to know people, and just ministering to people. Sometimes, like when I go to a house, a lot of times the funeral director is the main point of contact, but the very first time we see these families, me or one of the other associates, we're always the first ones because we do the removal. So we go to houses and talk with families. I pray with families. All sorts of things. Sometimes I haven't had it, I don't think, here too much, at least not at the funeral home. But sometimes I get connected with people, because of dealing with this stuff. So they'll contact me and we'll build a relationship, throughout the coming months when it gets a little tougher and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of everything. It's just handling bodies and helping families pretty much is the main task.
yeah, that's good. So, do you see yourself doing this for a while, or trying to move up, or anything like
So
that?
I'm really torn. Um, I'm really torn because I had a mentor told me, he said, when you go into the ministry, think about maybe, not putting, all your cards in the same hand, or I don't know how the phrase goes. I think I just butchered that really bad.
Sounds good to me.
But Allie always makes fun of me because I come up with these, I mix phrases or I'll mess them up. And then she has another friend whose husband does the same thing. So they text each other every time we come up with something new. But, uh, but you know what? So I'm torn because he told me, he said, be part time somewhere else. So that way, even if you are a full time pastor, be part time somewhere else. So that way you have somewhat of an out. But on the flip side, I mean, the hours I work and, the pressure I'm under and how long everything takes, uh, and how chaotic the schedule is. I mean, it's tough to say, okay, yeah, I want to do this for the next 50 years. But I have seriously considered becoming a funeral director because I've just felt like um, a great idea, a great pathway, uh, a great mix between a pastor and a funeral director. And a lot of pastors, believe it or not, have done that already, all over the place. So, but yeah, so I've considered that. I started a few classes, but I'm still kind of on the fence, and just really praying about what the Lord would have me to do, because ultimately I want to do what He tells me to do. So so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of not really sure, but um, I'm not really sure. But at least for right now, I'm content where I'm at. I'm content doing this. It is busy. It gets chaotic sometimes, and some weeks I'm overworked. But a lot of times it's handled pretty well because I can also work on some of my church stuff while I'm sitting at the office if it's slow. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to tag along, and we'll all be in prayer about what the right path is, because it's probably one of the most confusing things is trying to figure out where God wants us when He wants us to move. So,
yeah, right.
it takes a lot of prayer between each other and between just us and God, the church, and everything else. But working at a funeral home, I'm sure there's a lot of spiritual aspects, there's the physical aspect, there's the emotional aspect. And so, looking at uh, the emotional side, does it take a toll on you? And if it does, how do you deal with it?
Yeah. So um, one of my youth just asked me that the other day. He said, do y'all have counseling? Like y'all have like a weekly counseling session? I said, no, not really. Um, and I think the job definitely takes a toll on you for a couple different reasons. Some of them are just typical job tolls. It's you work crazy hours. I mean, there's all kinds of jobs where we work crazy hours. Um, and the mental strength you have to have, the emotional strength you have to have is pretty intense. Like I mean, imagine I've had this happen. Tuesday night, I'm on call Monday night, and then I get a call Monday night, so I don't have any time to work on my Wednesday night lesson. Get a call Tuesday night, I don't have any time to work on my Wednesday night lesson, and then I got to work at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Um, and so like Tuesday night, I get a call, and um, then when I get back at midnight or something, I'll have to stay up till 3 or 4 a.m. just to write a sermon, and hope to God I don't get another call. So there's that kind of toll. Now that's not a constant thing though. Um, the other toll, and this one kind of, I hate to really say you get cold to death doing this job, but I mean really the reality of it is you do, and you kind of have to. And it's so weird. Like when we bring a body in, a lot of times we didn't know this person at all. So, we're bringing this body in, we don't know this person. So to us, it's just another body. And so for the few I have had though, that are people that I've actually known. Now that's a little more troubling. It's like, whoa, like that guy, he's not supposed to be dead. And it seems like it's a lot, as far as the emotional and spiritual drain of it. It seems like it's a lot easier when they're older and they're a Christian, at least for me. Because I remember picking up this lady one time, and the family saying how great thou art at the house before we left. Like we
Mm.
all pretty much saying how great thou art. And then they sang again at the funeral. So um, I really like stuff like that. I mean, that grows me spiritually. Uh, but I gotta say, probably the most burdensome thing is, for one, it's like it's like I'm faced with the problem of evil every day. It's not like I can sit here and hide in the corner and pretend like, the world's really not that bad. Well, no, I can see, that it's that bad, So especially when we get kids, when we get babies, when we get like traumatic accidents, cases and stuff like that. That stuff is probably the hardest of all, and it's hard. It's hard doing the pickups. It's hard handling the bodies. It's hard at the funerals. I mean, the whole process is hard, and it's hard on all of us, And I really think the thing that really helps my team is that most of us work really well together, and we kind of are all there for each other, because if anybody's going to understand what the stuff we're dealing with, the stuff we're seeing, it's going to be each of us. So we take it seriously. My boss takes it seriously. If somebody's really struggling mentally with this job, he's not going to be offended if you say, "Hey, I can't do this job." And so actually, at our job, they'll hire you on, pay you a little less at first, and maybe even just start you part time to see if you can even handle what the job entails. So, but dealing with younger kids and traumatic accidents, that stuff's tough. But the hardest part of it all is watching the funerals. Watching when people finally have that closure and everybody's upset and they're just remembering that life, and when you're sitting there and you're listening for your sixth, seventh time that week, you're always thinking about it. You're always thinking about death. You're always thinking, I've seen people with decomposed bodies, just because somebody didn't check on them, or they just, they have a reputation for not reaching out. So you get a lot more paranoid about that kind of stuff. But in the end, and I know we're probably going to talk about this here in a second, but in the end, for me, even with all the stress and even with all the stress and the uh, just the burden of all of it, I mean, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ and knowing that He holds the keys to life and death, I just don't think I don't think this job would be as easy. So that'd be another interesting thing to talk about too, is how I see the difference between my Christian coworkers and my non-Christian coworkers.
Mm, yeah. So looking at, you had mentioned the problem with evil and just being able to see, I guess, the effects and where people probably come from looking at it. But how do you respond to families, especially whether it's a Christian family, a non-Christian family, young or old? How do you usually respond to families when you have to go in?
Yeah. So I mean, really, it's what any pastor would have to deal with. The only difference is at my job, people know I deal with it more often, so they're kind of, it's more of not like, uh, when you're a pastor, people come to you for spiritual guidance. They come for, your advice in situations, your knowledge in situations, you know. But when I work at the funeral home, it's more of like, how do you handle this? How do you handle this so often? Because they just don't know me in that way, so they don't respect me in the spiritual sense, uh, and really in any way like that. So, but I do tell people oftentimes when I'm at their houses and stuff, um, what I do, and I try to rely on the Holy Spirit's guidance too. But um, um, and people may disagree with me on this, but it's whatever. I get disagreed with on a lot, but um, but like when I'm uh, I want to rely on the Holy Spirit, but I also want to remember that what my purpose of being here is. When I'm a pastor and I go to somebody's house and they just lost a loved one, okay, I've got a different purpose. My purpose is to counsel the family. My purpose is to share the word of God with the family. My purpose is to sit with the family, help out the family every need they need. But when I go to the house at 2 a.m. to pick up the body for the first time, my I feel like my job is to kind of give the family as much peace and comfort as possible, and let them know, hey, we care about you. We're not just doing this for money. We actually care about you. We treat this person like it's our own loved one. All that stuff. And so I really feel comfortable kind of stopping at that point where I say, okay, I'm willing to pray with these families, especially in the middle of the night. I'm willing to pray with these families, but I'm not going to push faith and belief and all that on them during this difficult time. Um, because I just don't personally, I just don't think that's what the job calls for. So and plus they don't know me in that way, so they're not coming to me for that kind of spiritual advice, you know. So I just tell people, hey, I'm a minister. Is it okay if I pray with you? And oftentimes, you know, people will just say yes. I've never had anybody tell me no, but I look for signs of Christian symbols and verses and stuff around the house. Of what kind of shirts are people wearing, you know, are they Christian shirts or whatever? So, you know, I'm looking for signs and stuff. But um, and oftentimes, maybe if there's a relationship continues to build, you know, then I can, you know, I can open up a better time, you know, and be able to talk to them more, stuff like that. But for the most part, as far as ministry goes, I listen, I talk to them, and I pray with them. And you know, if they ask for my spiritual advice, I give it to them. But I just don't feel like that's my job in that setting. And a lot of times, these families, if they're not connected with the church, there's a pastor's coming to preach the funeral so they can get connected, you know. And so, and also, we've also got that challenge of, okay, we do have a business side of all this stuff we've got to deal with. So if there's any frustration there, and I'm to give out my personal information to these families, and then something happens, you know, I could get caught in the crosshairs of that. So I have to be very careful, but I just kind of do as the Spirit leads me.
It's good. It's a good way to respond, I think. I'm trying to balance everything. So you mentioned your Christian coworkers and non-Christian coworkers. What's the main difference that you can see between the two dealing with this type of job?
Um, I don't know. I mean, like, it seems like there's more empathy and sympathy from Christian workers. I like the non-Christian ones that I work with. It seems like they do just treat it as if, okay, we've got another body to pick up. You know, it's not that they're terrible people. You know, it's not that they don't care about the families. It's not that they don't know the families are struggling. It's just, I think that, you know, like if you believe that these people are just, you know, just worm dirt, you know, pretty much, um, uh, which one of my coworkers have said that. But uh, if you think that's the case, then of course you're going to treat it as such. You're going to be a little rougher with it. You're going to, you know, you're just going to be like, okay, you know, the family's struggling, whatever, you know. And a lot of times they can relate it, you know, to losing someone in their own family. So we see that a lot too. But um, it seems like the Christian coworkers that I have, they're a lot more. They care a lot more about the families, I think, and I also think in the long run they deal with it. You know, because I think it's the same thing with all non-Christian people. Is they just shy away from any uncomfortable topics, whereas Christians, you know, we can face death head on. I don't need to be afraid to talk about death. I don't need to be afraid to bring it up to my youth group. You know, I don't need to be, you know, worried, you know, what am I going to say, you know, when this kid, you know, a football player dies at the high school, what am I going to say, uh, you know, I don't, which that really happened. That's why I said that. It's not not something I'm hoping to happen, but it actually happened at our high school. But, you know, so I think that's the main difference I see is the sympathy and empathy that's there, um, and specifically for the families. Now, that's not to say that the non-Christian people don't do that. I mean, a lot of times, um, the non-Christian coworkers, you know, they're some of the nicest people to the families and stuff like that. But I wonder sometimes, are they really genuine? Uh, you know, and how I would be curious to ask some of them, how do you deal with this if you don't believe, you know, in life after death? But a lot of times people just, you know, you can face that reality. I mean, atheists are some of the strongest atheists in the world, the most brilliant atheists. I mean, they realize the reality of death. I think a lot of people don't realize the reality of death, but I believe they do, and I believe they're so confident in their worldview that they're not as worried about it. They know they found a purpose in life. So yeah, it's kind of it's one of them things. I haven't had too many conversations with it, so this is just observation. But you know, and I could be wrong. I mean, I could be accusing them of not being sympathetic as much as us. But I mean, I could be wrong. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I think when you are a Christian, you come from seeing the grace of God so that you can be more sympathetic to anybody, whether how maybe the family responds when their loved one passes away versus just seeing that body as we were created in the image of God's. So you see, and then having deaths in your family, you see what God has done through that. And so you can be more sympathetic to each of those families looking into that situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a part of the faith. Everything is to be done with love. Whereas if you're in the flesh, if you're living your life not for God, then our key thing is everything's about me and you're focused on me, and it just shies away. That's your flesh response. So, how does this job affect your theology of life after death and your theology of problem of evil? Looking at that situation.
Um, I mean, as far as theology of life after death, I mean, nothing's really changed. I think it just makes it a little more real. I mean, I haven't really changed my theology. Because, a lot of times life after death theology, it comes when you actually see the person die, this is what I saw. This is why I think, oh, my loved one saw an angel when she took her last breath or whatever. But so my theology really hasn't changed. It's just I have more experience to talk about it, So, um, um, so like when I'm sitting in, I sit through a lot of services, a lot of pastors. I've met pastors from all different walks of life. I've met, um, I have, we had one. I believe he was a Black Hebrew Israelite, but I'm really not sure. But he came and spoke, and I've talked about this a lot with my friends. The one day we had a Catholic, a Seventh-day Adventist, and a Mormon all came to speak at the same funeral, and I was just ecstatic to hear what they had to say. Um, but it is the most interesting thing to me is because we always have that conversation as pastors. What do you say at a funeral where you're pretty much sure that the person is not a Christian? And so like when I go to like one of these cult leader, when I go to one of these cult funerals, where like a Mormon church is preaching and they're preaching about afterlife or something, that does change my experience, because how often does a Christian pastor get to sit at a Mormon funeral? Um,
Yeah.
and so so as far as like theology, what do I think about it? I mean, my beliefs are still the same, but now I have all these experiences that really challenge my beliefs. Like I've seen a lot of people that have died that, I mean, gosh, I mean, you talk to their families about their lives and stuff, and they're just, it's almost like they're such a great person, but I mean, there's no Jesus, there's no gospel in their life, and so that's really challenging to me, to be able to to tell somebody, hey, the salvation is only through Jesus Christ, whether you're good or a good person or not. So that's a major challenge. The other major challenge is for the non-Christian funerals, where they're just um, uh, well, I kind of just mentioned that, but um, and so we also sitting in like you hearing all these preachers and they're talking about all this stuff. They each have their own understanding of the afterlife. I still have yet to hear one that believed in soul sleep. I haven't been to Jehovah's Witness funeral, but yet, but because some of them believe in soul sleep. So it is interesting though, just hearing these pastors, and I've talked to some of them about their beliefs, because if there's anybody I really get to talk to a lot, is some of the pastors, and I always tell them, hey, I'm a pastor in Florida City or whatever, and so we talk about pastoring and the theology of death and some of that kind of stuff. So um, so yeah, I think I don't really think my theology has changed. Um, I just think that now I have all these experiences to kind of go with and back up that theology, and I can be a little more sympathetic, I think, to multiple families, even when they may have someone that's died that's not a Christian, you know, and plus just hearing the message over and over again. I mean, I pretty much preached my first funeral and a couple of days ago, and I've heard sermons after sermon after I've heard funeral after funeral, so I kind of know the best ways to run a funeral. I know that some of the best things to say, some of the best scriptures to talk about, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's interesting just hearing some of these guys talk about uh, about their lives and about what they think it is to be saved, and how many preachers, share the gospel at funerals. I mean, there's just a lot of things I've learned just from sitting in funerals and dealing with that. Now, as far as the problem of evil goes, it's the same way. I mean, I still respond to the problem of evil the same way I have, but now I feel like I have experiences that I've actually seen that I can add to the discussion. Whether it be the boy that we got that was tortured, or some of the other, just super sad cases, or the boy that had cancer. Some of the sadder cases we've had. We I can sympathize a little more with the problem of evil. Why did these things happen? Why does God allow these things to happen? Where was He at? You know, so my answer is still the same, but it's the same thing with theology. It's just my experiences have changed.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to equip you, especially, and who knows what God will continue to do with that and continue to use you to influence, whether it be the families, to influence students later in their lifetime. Because I'm sure you'll have some students at some points that'll have family members that have passed away, maybe some that are just one of their siblings. So I think that has it's definitely equipping you
Yeah,
for something we
and
know
I've got
later.
some, um, and I've got some youth that, I mean, if anybody dies, it could be somebody they read on the internet that died, you know, 3 hours away that they didn't even know, but their first name or something, and they'll still treat it as if it was the biggest person
Yeah,
in their life. So everybody, and that's what's cool about this is everybody has to deal with it, and it opens up a lot of gospel conversations, more so outside of the funeral home than inside the funeral home. When I'm talking to people at lunchtime or at a church event or just any event, family gathering, because people ask me all the time, how do you get through this? And I say, because I know who holds the keys to life and death, and it kind of opens up gospel conversations.
yeah, it's really awesome. Good connection aspect of bivocational ministry. But can you tell? I was just thinking about this question. Can you tell the difference when you walk into funeral service of whether it be a Christian and a non-Christian, even like Mormons and Catholics, like the different sects? Is there like a different atmosphere? Can you tell in the responses of the families the difference?
Um, Generally, I think you can, but I think there's sometimes you really can't because, um, the same way we would see, like in debates and stuff, you would see an atheist talk about death and you see a Christian talk about death. Both are confident, both never looked fearful, talking about death. Like, there's nothing like that's going on, they found their purpose. So, the same way with non-Christians, from what I've seen generally, is that non-Christian people, they seem to take death a lot harder, because I mean, where's their hope supposed to go? So they seem to take death a lot harder. And not only that, because some people have told me, when I've told them that, they'll say, "Well, I've seen Christians that they take death just as hard." And listen, I'm not saying that Christians don't take death hard. I'm not saying, hey, you shouldn't be upset when your loved one dies, But what I have seen though is that there are Christians that don't. It's not that they don't have faith. It's just that their faith is so weak, I think, that and they don't. It's almost like they don't, like, yeah, they may have their faith in Jesus, they may believe Jesus did what He did, but it's like there's this lack of faith a little bit as when it comes to death,
Mm.
because it's one of those things. Like, I've never met somebody that lives in heaven, um, so there's like I think there's that lack of faith and trust in God, and that's what I think I was faced with before, long before I came to the funeral home, but even more so when I came to the funeral home, is how confident am I that when somebody dies that's a Christian, they are instantly, absent from the body is present with the Lord, is what He says in 2 Corinthians 5, I believe. So I think I do kind of see that difference. Now, I've been to a lot of Catholic services. I've only been to a couple of Mormon services, and then some of these like weird, possibly Christian churches that are out there, but smaller churches. But um, they're if anything, there's a difference with the pastor, um, and how they deal with the families and stuff. like some of these guys that believe you have to follow the Old Testament law, they're going to talk about it during that message. You know,
Mm.
I remember one lady in particular when she died, and she had a pastor. They must have been Seventh Day Adventist, but he got up there and he said, the Bible says we're supposed to follow the laws of the Old Testament to be saved, and she did that, pretty much. Um, and so, but even when he was talking about it, you can kind of tell sometimes where there's not as much grace in their voices and stuff. But and then a Catholic service is just like a Catholic church service. I mean, they read the liturgy. There is I have it. There's not as much crying and being upset in a Catholic service. It almost like they maybe feel like they're not supposed to or something, because it's so
Yeah.
formal in a Catholic service. Um, it just depends. It depends who's speaking, what the family members are like. Um, it's just it's just so much more liturgical, I guess, um, than a normal like a regular Christian service, I reckon.
Yeah. I think you kind of see that a lot. Even growing up, you're told as Christians, it's like we do have that theology. We know who holds the keys. We know where that person's at, whether it be our family member or somebody we knew who followed Christ. We know where they're at, so we're not supposed to cry. I think that's a common misunderstanding about being a Christian. So I think that's especially where the Catholics get it from. I know growing up, I probably thought that I'm like, I'm not supposed to cry. I'm supposed to be happy. And I've seen like people like you don't need to cry at my funeral. We're gonna have a good old time. I remember one I attended, they called it a funeral, and like they had a DJ and bouncy houses after the service and everything
It's
else.
it's interesting because it seems like Hispanics, which is kind of their culture. I mean, if I remember this right, I mean Cinco de Mayo is pretty much a celebration of the dead. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so but it seems like a lot of Hispanic funerals there is a lot more celebration um, than there is like sadness and stuff. Now, granted, I mean, there's sadness. I mean, I've never hardly ever been to a funeral where there's no sadness, unless it was like,
yeah,
oh, they've been suffering with cancer for 5 years or something. It's like a more of a relief, I guess, for them. But yeah,
yeah. It's interesting to see. I guess culture wise too. I think that was when I was in Ecuador. We saw a funeral procession go by, and they're literally like playing music on the back of the truck, and the caskets in the back of the truck, and it's just like a parade of people marching around them. It
yeah.
was a lot different than what I know I've seen around here. And so, all of this saying, how does this coincide with being a youth pastor? I know you've touched on it a little bit, but you want to
Yeah,
give another
so
thought?
so like I mentioned earlier, I'm actually on call. Um, I'm on call. I'm on call 7 out of 14 days in a pay period. So, um, but anyways, I was on call on a Tuesday, and I didn't know about it, but there was a boy in our county that he was struggling with cancer. He got cancer, and he had a lot of support. It was going all around the school, and I actually went and picked him up that night. Um, so that was on a Tuesday night. So I preach every Wednesday pretty much, and so Wednesday night I went. I don't remember what I was talking about, but I remember talking about that at least at the end during the gospel presentation. I said, "Listen, this boy was 17." I said, "If and it's not like he didn't do something stupid. He wasn't driving his car too fast. He wasn't doing some stupid stunt on a bike. There was nothing like that was happening. It was he just." I mean, he just got caught with this cancer, and this cancer just got him.
Mm.
And I said, "You do not know when you are going to die." And I use that a lot with Christians because I think when we think about death and we realize, hey, at the end of all this, we're all going to die. I think it gets us to think more about this life deeper. It forces us to ask the deeper questions, the tougher questions, and to really find out what's this life about. What do we do with it from here? And so the other thing is um, so there's kind of the ministry aspect. There's kind of the gospel aspect. So it helps me to share the gospel a little better. And then But the most helpful thing I think for me is the respect aspect because um, like just doing this job and as tough as it is, mentally, physically, and emotionally, a lot of people have a higher level of respect for me, you know. So it kind of increases my respect among people. Which I mean, the more you're respected as a pastor, the more people are willing to talk to you and have conversations with you and stuff like that. And that's kind of one of the things every pastor is continuously trying to do is trying to gain and earn the respect of others. Um, so so that has helped out a lot. And also, tearing your ACL helps out with that respect a lot too.
Yeah, it's funny what things you can do to get respect from teenagers.
Yeah,
Most random
painful.
things ever. But yeah, and so I think that's all the main questions I have as far as interview wise. But I guess application, how does this pertain to us? How can it pertain to the common individual? What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, so
We had a
there's
takeaway.
yeah, there's a lot of scripture passages that are brought up. Um, you know, in some funerals, uh, you know, people always ask me, you know, what is as you get crazy cases? I say, yeah, but you know, we get some crazy cases, some really sad cases, but 9 times out of 10, you know, we're getting cases of someone that's lived a full life. You know, they're 80, 90 years old, they lived a full life. You know, they loved their family, they were loved by their family. You know, and we're kind of, I mean, we're not the Georgia Bible Belt, but you know, we're country Florida, so it's there's a lot of Christianity around here, you know. So a lot of that's what it is most of the time. Um, so like I get to sit in these sermons and these lessons and stuff like that, and hearing these preachers talk and going over these biblical passages, and honestly, a lot of times I'm encouraged. You know, like I said, how do you do this job? It's because I know who holds the keys to life and death. You know, let me read that verse real quick. This is it's in Revelation chapter 1, verse 18. It says, I'll read 17. It says, when I saw him, this is John the apostle talking, when I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. He laid his right hand on me and said, this is talking about Jesus here, don't be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. I was dead, but look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. Um, so it's always an encouragement to me to know that as a Christian, we don't have to be afraid of these things. You know, we don't have to be afraid
Yeah,
of we don't have to be afraid of death. I don't have to be afraid of talking about death. Like we should be able to face all these things head on because we know who's ultimately in control here. We know who has our best interest in mind. We know who has sovereignly planned out. You know, if you want to know how I what I think about that, you can listen to the Monism podcast. But he sovereignly planned out how this world would work, and how we would be able to make free will choices. I got to throw that in there. But so I just think it's an encouragement. It's like and it's like he says in Corinthians. Death wears. He's quoting the Old Testament, I believe, but "Oh, death, where is
yeah,
thy sting? Oh, grave, where is your victory?" It's because death doesn't have a victory. The grave doesn't have a victory because Jesus Christ is our victory. And so
yeah,
it's for me, it's really strengthened my faith. I think more so than ever. And not only that, when I'm having a rough day and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, I've gotten in this argument or that argument, or I still got to write a sermon, and then all of a sudden I get a call and I'm at some family's house that is having the worst night of their entire lives. It helps me to
yeah,
say, okay, all that stuff I was upset about is minimal. It kind of keeps me in focus and focusing on what's really important in the world,
mhm,
and dealing with gospel issues.
yeah. It's a really humble experience, and I mean, uh, looking at all of that, you can look in the Bible and see cases like while you were talking, I was thinking of Lazarus when he had died, and got Jesus was like, "We'll wait," and he waited there instead of going right there because he knew what would happen, and he knew that he had the power over life and death. And I've been reading through Romans and looking at that. I think it was specifically yesterday reading Romans 7, talking about that when we're in Christ, we were brought to life. We were living in life and victory now. And it's like, why would you go back? And so oftentimes we live in that non-peaceful stage. We go back to what we were before. And I guess that's one aspect we can look at as Christians, that we can have that peace amidst the chaos, because we, like you said, we know who holds the keys, and we know that he won the victory already.
Right.
And
And that's what I tell people a lot of times. They'll ask me, how do you do this job, because a lot of people, I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of people, even Christian people, would tell me, oh, I can't do that job, And I really think if we really got down to why, it's lack of maybe not lack of faith, but maybe lack of trust in God.
yeah,
Just because they just don't trust in that, or sometimes it's just people don't have the emotional capacity to deal with something so intense too. So there's also that,
yeah,
but there's just this peace that I can't explain. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe somebody should put this in a Bible verse, but you become a Christian, and and you trust in God, and this peace that surpasses all understanding comes upon you. That is a
yeah.
Bible verse for y'all heathens out there who don't know that, but in Philippians. But and if I wasn't a heathen, I'd be able to tell you where it was. So
We're working on that.
yeah,
It's okay.
it's got to be chapter 4. It's got to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. One of those two. I'm pretty sure it's chapter 4. So
Yeah,
uh, but yeah, so man, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from being in the midst of all this stuff.
yeah. Looking at kind of the last question, we can kind of wrap things up here. Have you seen a lot where good things can come out of death? Have you seen like reassurances in your experiences of that question?
Yeah, so uh, I remember a couple of months ago, uh, there was a shoot. I'm trying to think if I can share it publicly or not. um,
Yeah.
but pretty much, a young guy had died, um, and he killed himself, and I think everybody pretty much knew it. Um, but I remember sitting there in the back, and a lot of times I sit there, I'm so quiet, nobody realizes I'm there. But I remember these guys coming together, and from the language they were using, they probably weren't Christians, but um,
Mm.
they came together and they were like, you know what, man, let's agree, let's all agree right here that none of us go out this way. That was so it was
Mm.
something. There's something that comes out of stuff like that. It's like, hey, this is, when you can see what it does to people and to families and stuff, it just kind of puts it all into consideration. You know, um, and I don't know what the suicide rate is among funeral workers, but um, it just kind of puts all that into consideration. But you also, one of the best things you see is families coming together. Now, that doesn't happen every time. Sometimes families do not come together and they grow further
Mm.
apart in situations like this. But a lot of times I see families, they come together, they unite together, and they say, let's deal with this together as a family, And a lot of times, family comes out of town, all the families together, and they're just loving on each other. I've seen plenty of people, start going back to church because it's a wake up call, that, hey, I'm missing something here, But on the flip side, I've also seen the negative impacts of it. I've seen people just say, I'm done with your God, I'm done with Christianity, I'm done with church, because if God didn't care about saving my mother or saving my daughter or saving whoever, saving my friend, if God didn't care about that, then I don't care about him, So I've seen the negative impacts as
Mm.
well. Um, but I do believe that God can, like Romans 8:38 says, He can make good come out of any situation for those who love Him. That's contingency. If you don't love the Lord, then it's never going to feel like good's coming out of the situation. So, but yeah, I can't think of too many more experiences. But I mean, but that's a big one. People getting back into church, or even starting to go to church. I mean, I'm sure there's been plenty of people that have gotten saved, or like when I preach this funeral today, I'm hoping I built some relationships with some non-Christian people that maybe one day will flourish into a gospel conversation. So I've heard from pastors, talking about stuff like that has happened. And then after a death, comes counseling. You get to spend time with the families. You get to love on the families even more. Um, we help out families. We just there's all kinds of things that could come from it. Um, and there's also there's also negative opportunities as well. So um, I just think the key is though that people need to get close to God, especially in circumstances like that. And I think that's going to be a key.
Yeah, I think I've seen that effects even in my own family where family members that I haven't seen in I don't know how long will finally get together and everybody's um, just being together. It shows something different. Maybe something different you didn't even know about that family member. We saw something like that,
Yeah,
and
it's like when I was a kid, my grandma died, and I didn't know, but my aunt told me this has been years since she died, and a great grandma of mine, but she told me that this grandma of it was her grandma. She said she when she was alive, she prayed for every single person in this family to get saved, and she said one by one, every single person in our family started getting saved. And then she said when she died, she passed on the baton to me. And then she said, and Jonathan, when I die, I'm passing on the baton to you. So I
wow,
mean, uh, I mean, just how special is that a lady that I met her when I was real little, but I'd never even seen her since then. And I believe her prayers are the reasons that half of my family are Christians today. Um, some of them need some more prayer.
yeah. The prayer of a righteous man availeth much.
Yeah, or woman.
No, yeah, or woman,
Learn the Greek.
mankind in general.
Yeah, learn the Greek. You'll know it's supposed to be for men and women.
Yeah, if I wasn't a heathen, I could tell you where that was at, but it's in
James
there
5. I
somewhere.
know that one. It's James 5:16.
Okay, good.
I just preached it last week.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and I mean that's when things like this bring up certain questions, gospel that can lead to gospel conversations pretty quick. I'm seeing the effects of that, but well, I want to thank you, Jonathan, for sharing with all of us, sharing with me, so we can learn something new, whether it be what we learned in the funeral industry and just more about you and uh, how your faith is affected, how your faith has grown in this aspect of your life this season.
Yeah, it was great podcast, and I appreciate you doing this. I just want to throw this out there that like I said, one of the things I get out of this is a lot of times people respect me more when it comes to death. So if you're dealing with something, you're dealing with death, or you have questions about it, or you got why would God do this? Why would God allow that? Blah blah blah. All those questions. I shouldn't say blah blah blah, but I said that so I would stop talking. Um, but if you need somebody to talk to, you need somebody to have a conversation or to ask questions with, just email us gracebondministries@gmail.com, and we'll be in touch, and we'll see what we can do to help you, kind of guide you through some of the struggles that come after death, and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. We'd love to get in touch with any of y'all, and I know we're going to start planning out some more podcasts and some different subjects and a wide range of different subjects to come up with. So y'all keep in touch, keep in tune with what we're gonna do, and we'll get it out to you as the time comes. So it looks like we're doing pretty well at this every other week thing. So we're hoping to keep that up for you guys.
Yeah, and it's a struggle.
Oh, it is.
We got some busy lives. It's a struggle, making solid content every 2 weeks, but we definitely want to keep that up. And anybody has any ideas, or if you're like, hey, I want to be on the podcast, or email me. I really would like to have a lot more testimony episodes too. So if somebody wants to go on here and just share your testimony, that'd be great. So yeah, just check out some of the other videos. Lots of theology videos, lots of practical ministry, devotionals. Lots of different things on there. So, like he said, we've got a lot coming up. We got to get some confirmations from some people, and we're just if we can get these people that we're connected with, find some time to get on here. We're going to have some extremely interesting conversations, and certain of them are probably going to be some extremely interesting and long conversations. But
yeah, maybe some two-parters in there somewhere.
Yeah, there might be a couple two-parters. So, but yeah. And if you just want to know more about the funeral stuff, let me know. Well, maybe we'll make some more videos talking about some of the more nitty-gritty things.
Yeah, some of the processes that we hear about, we see on like NCIS, but we never.
Yeah, how do you not throw up when you see maggots coming out of a body's face?
Febreze sheet, right?
Something like that. I stuck a Lysol wipe in my mask one time because the smell was so bad. And then I asked my boss, I said, "Hey, what do you think would happen if I stuck a Lysol wipe in my mask?" And he laughed and he said, "You would die." This was the day after. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, that's good."
Good enough. But yeah, there's always more stories, always more conversations. But if you want those, email us at gracebondministries@gmail.com. Check out some of our other podcasts about if you want something super deep, go your Molinism, and then we discussed Problem of Evil like 3 months ago, probably. So if you want to go back and check that one out, go ahead and check that one out. Our most recent one, Spiritual Gifts, and we're looking forward to our next time on the podcast. So do you have any other, want to close this out, Jonathan? Any other sayings?
Nope, that's it. We'll see y'all next time. Deuces.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the Grace Bond Ministries podcast or listening to the podcast. I know there's various ways that you could be listening to this right now or watching this right now, but I just want to say thank you so much. And if you would, wherever you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Podcast, please leave a 5-star review and write a little thing in there. If you're on Facebook, leave a comment. Let me know how this impacted you, or even any other questions or comments or concerns you may have. And also, if you have an idea or you have something you'd really want to talk more deeply about, you can always email me at gracebondministries@gmail.com. But thank you so much. Remember, for it is by grace you are saved through faith, and not of yourselves, for it is the gift of God. Thank you for listening to Grace Bond Ministries.